Welcome to the Bommarito Automotive 500 Race Review. I am Dan Maldonado, co-host of the Turn 4 podcast. Our other co-host, Tim, is out on an important assignment, so you're going to get about an hour or so of just me. So I do thank you for tuning in, as always, and let's get right down to it. So first, I want to say how thrilled I am to see this race and track thriving. It was announced prior to the race on Saturday that the Worldwide Technology Raceway and IndyCar had signed a 5-year extension. Didn't say if it would continue to be a night race. I'm sure it will be. I think night races at Worldwide Technology Raceway is definitely the way to go. I don't think anybody wants to sit in the grandstands in 100-degree plus weather to watch an IndyCar race, regardless of how exciting or exciting these races can be. I think also too, this goes along with as a nice compliment to Iowa, who also announced a 3-year program with Hy-Vee as their sponsor. And that race is going to kick off next year. To me, this is Midwest oval track race where IndyCar draws the best, I feel. I think Iowa needs to be a night race as well for the same reasons, given the time of year and the heat. This likely means only one Texas race, which is fine, in my opinion. I think until they find a way to remove that chemical from the track surface or repave it, IndyCar is ruined at TMS. Absolutely, without a doubt, one of the best races on the IndyCar calendar back when it was an IRL event. This was definitely one of the must-watch races on the calendar, had great attendance there. Still can be a good one if they figure out a way to remove this chemical or repave this track. Otherwise, it really proved to be just a one groove, follow the leader kind of track, which is really a shame. Getting right into the results for the Bommarito Automotive Group 500. I kind of just like saying that. I want to call out that it's taken Team Penske 9 rounds to really start clicking. They've had some bad luck. They've been kind of lost like they were at Indianapolis. And things seem to really start coming together, especially for Josef Newgarden, kicking off with his win at Mid-Ohio, and then Will Power at IMS last week. Surprising, because I don't really believe anyone would believe that this would be the case for Team Penske going into this season. So as far as finishes, first win, this is the second win by Josef Newgarden this season. First place, he beat himself up a little bit after qualifying, which was tough. I think he had a good qualifying effort. I don't see anything there, but of course I think it's just the masters of perfection, right? They want to be able to pull in the best possible laps when they can and really show from the beginning. But I don't think he had any problems with there, even though he's beating himself up in a lot of ways there. To me, I think this is really at the heart of the issue for Team Penske and the Penske drivers, in particular, Newgarden and Power, and that's beating themselves up over qualifying or beating themselves up over finishes. I think they're pressing. I think they seem to be pushing a bit, pressing a bit, however you want to say that, and really unable to lie in wait and pick their moments to attack. No greater example than that coming from Power's situation in Nashville, where he bounced off of almost everybody, even his teammates. And I imagine that has something to do with driving for the marquee team in American open wheel racing. I think when you race for Team Penske, I think perfection and results are really expected. And if you start out a little slow and the results aren't quite there just yet, I think that you can start pressing and you start making some really silly decisions. So third place, Will Power. I think this is a really nice follow-up to his win last week at IMS Road Course. And again, speaking to my point, in his post-race interview, Power stated that this was the best they could hope for, which to me is interesting considering he was the pole winner. So third place was the best he could hope for. For me, I think this is a nice improvement by Will and really something that to take away from here, in that that win last week might have taken some of the pressure off of them. He's pushing a little less, which means he was more comfortable with accepting that third place finish this week at Worldwide Technology Raceway. And that's why he didn't do anything to throw away that third place. Fourth place, here's a nice one, Scotty McLaughlin. Here's a guy similar to Grosjean who really has overachieved on ovals this year. He comes from a road racing background. I don't know that anybody had a lot of expectations for Scotty McLaughlin going into this season, given his road racing background. Of course, racing for Team Penske makes a little bit of a difference there, that he should have very well prepared cars. He should have a very well prepared team behind him to help coach him along and to help him come along in his oval debuts. And he's done, I think, pretty well. I finished second in his first Texas race, eighth in the second Texas race, floundered at Indianapolis alongside the rest of the team, really. And then fourth place this past weekend. So he was, of course, highest Indy qualifier at 17th among his teammates. I do want to say that when I say they floundered at Indianapolis, they did. But he was the best qualifier at Indy with a 17th place qualifying. So I think he's overachieving. I think if you move into Simon Pagenaud, who finished eighth this weekend, I think that might be somebody who might not be achieving at quite the level that he could be. But I feel like in a lot of ways, and this is certainly the silly season and some of the reporting that you see on social media and in some of the IndyCar publications, is that Simon's the odd man out, it seems like, at Team Penske. His contract situation's unsettled, continues to be unsettled. And he's being raced unusually hard by his teammates, particularly Newgarden and Power, which I think is, I mean, if you want to read between the lines, maybe, you come up with 2 and 2 and come up with 5 and say, this is all because they know they're not going to be a teammate next year, perhaps. But some reason they're racing Simon very, very hard. I think eighth place here was a good finish for Simon, given the extra stop for the wing change and the extra stops in general. He stopped 6 times, right? First through third stopped 3 times. Anybody else? First through fourth actually stopped 3 times. So 6 times he finished eighth. Well done, Simon Pagenaud. And shout out for the aero screen. I know this wasn't a popular add-on for some of the traditionalists. For me, it really just ruined the lines of the IndyCar. I understand from a safety standpoint, maybe I am one of those traditionalists, but it really impacted the lines of the car. But when Simon's end plate came off after contact with Josef Newgarden, it flew up and back. And I believe it either hit the car of Scott Dixon or Felix Rosenqvist. I saw a little orange there. Those are the 2 cars that I think of when I think of orange. Townsend Bell suggested it was Dixon, but it looked to me like it was Felix. So really a shout out to the aero screen. We know 6 years ago today, I believe that, Justin Wilson lost his life because of being hit by a flying piece, it directly on his helmet by an errant piece. So shout out to the aero screen. I love it or hate it in terms of what it looks like or what it does to the lines of the cars, but it definitely proves itself to do what it was intended to do, and that was protect the lives of these IndyCar drivers. Moving on to Aero McLaren, second place, Pato Award. This is huge. This is huge for Pato. He rolls out of St. Louis with a second place, elevating him to first place in the season championship. Think about that. First place, leaving Worldwide Technology Raceway, where 2 races ago he was in third place behind Palou and Dixon. Now he's 10 points ahead of Palou, who had a very unfortunate trip to Worldwide Technology Raceway, and we'll talk about that. And Pato was good here. He has been good here. He was good here last year. He's good here this year. Started 5th, stayed out of trouble, and let the race come to him, which I think is the best thing you can do when you're racing for a season championship. A la Scott Dixon. That's some of the things that's been part of Scott's success and the success of Chip Ganassi Racing over the last several years is you let the race come to you. Don't push. Let's be smart. Let's work the strategy. Stay out of trouble, a little luck here and there, right? But at the end of the day, I think he played it just as good as he possibly could and took home second place, and more importantly, first place in that season championship, really making things interesting as they get ready for the West Coast swing. Felix Rosenqvist, a little less luck on that one. DNF for Felix after a very clean, uneventful race. Lap 49 pit stop yielded this, in my opinion, very bizarre incident when the wheels started to spin before he was let off the jack. I don't know the last time that I remember seeing something like that happen in an IndyCar race. I don't know the process for engaging first, or if the cars itself will allow you to engage first, if it's up in the air, or if the fuel probe's still in there. It just seemed a very bizarre end to me, and it resulted in a broken drive shaft or half shaft because of that drop while the wheels were spinning. So really just bad luck for Felix Rosenqvist in this thing. Outstanding luck moving into the Foyt team, 5th place, Sebastian Bourdais. Just a good, smart race for Sebastian, starting with an absence of any other drivers trying to run up the back of the Rocket Foyt entry here. He led 18 laps. The strategy really looked good, and it looked like it was going to pay off, possibly with a win. But they just missed it with 10 to 15 laps to go. Sebastian was back in this 5th place. Looked like he was just kind of lying in wait, saving the car, saving the tires, getting ready to make a go at this, but it just really never materialized. I was in charge of live tweeting this weekend during the event, and I tweeted out that if Bourdais won or finished on podium, I would have a tear. And let me tell you, I meant it. I really did mean it. This team has had a hell of a year, and I don't mean that in a good way. It's had a hell of a year. Since a very promising start in preseason testing and a 5th place finish at Barber during the first race of the season, it's just been bad luck or no luck for Sebastian Bourdais and AJ Foyt Racing. Just a real drag. Continuing on with his teammate, Dalton Collette, finishing 12th. Eventful early on for Dalton. Lap 12 restart after the Ray Hall and Jones incident, which we're going to get into. I can't wait to talk about that. He got bumped by Ed Carpenter and spun out, no damage, and he was able to carry on. So a little bit of luck there, really. I mean, he could have been certainly a lot worse, but he was able to recover from that and finish 12th. He did also get bumped by Roman Grosjean as Grosjean was turning up the freight train coming through the midfield right around that lap 80. And again, we'll talk about that in a little bit too. But Dalton's 12th place, along with the 5th place by Bourdais, caps off the best finish as a team for Foyt, AJ Foyt Racing this season. So bravo, guys. I couldn't be happier for that team. I think they deserve it. They certainly earned it. And have really put on a great show at Worldwide Technology Raceway this past weekend. So I hope it continues on into the final 3 races of the season, so they can go into the off season with some momentum and feeling good that the plans and the things that they've put in place are really starting to mature. Continuing on with 6th place, Takuma Sato. Let's face it, Takuma Sato is always good on ovals. He's a 2-time IndyCar champ, which proves that. Again, though, the Ray Hall Letterman Lanigan qualifying handicap, just continues to push these guys into a situation of having to, race through the field, which on an oval it can be dangerous, and that's probably what really caught out Graham. I think, Graham Rahal finishing off in 23rd place. He ended up tangling with Ed Jones, which is really not ideal. Graham did have a good qualifying effort with this race at 9th. Relatively speaking, good qualifying effort there. Got caught up with Ed Jones, who said on the broadcast, "I got Rahal." That's the first time I've heard anybody say that about Graham. I'm not in the inner circle, of course. I'm more of an NBC watcher, but I've never really seen anybody or would suggest that Graham is a dirty driver or somebody like that just does unnecessary things. They showed a lot of the replays of this incident, and it was clear Graham was hard on the brakes going into this turn, but you could see that his calipers were glowing bright red. So it wasn't like Graham was going in there and was just not yielding the position or trying to back out of the position, because he clearly was. He was on the binders there as hard as he could do it. And we'll talk about it when we get there, but I don't think Ed Jones was necessarily at fault here either, right? Like Graham said, he ran out of talent. Why? That's really not a great thing to say. I think that's just sour grapes. It's really not a great thing to say about a fellow competitor there. Did he run out of talent? No, I think he ran out of downforce. I think he drifted up a little bit, and I think he drifted into Graham as a result of that. Neither one of them should have been in there at that point of the race. Lap 2, I don't really think that that's where somebody should be racing side by side on an oval like that. Whether or not the tires are even up to pressures and temperatures by that point is anybody's guess. I don't think that this is a racing incident. I don't think that it was something that Ed Jones did malicious. I don't think he ran out of talent, certainly. And I don't think it was a situation where Graham stuck his nose somewhere where it didn't belong, because he was trying to get his nose out of there. So moving along, Chip Ganassi Racing, 9th place for Marcus Ericsson. This has really been the Swede's time to shine. Marcus has come alive since that win in Detroit. And I think it's really starting to click for Marcus right now, at a time where his championship leading teammates are starting to falter a little bit. There was a lot of talk about Grosjean starting his first oval race this past weekend, but Marcus comes from essentially the same background as Grosjean. And I believe, and it shows, that Marcus embraced oval racing right from the beginning as he started his career in IndyCar. So good on him, good finish for him. Certainly, carrying the Chip Ganassi standard at this point with this 9th place finish. And moving on to Tony Kanaan, who's really in a very part-time effort this year, picking up the ovals in place of Jimmy Johnson for this year. Definitely my opinion that Jimmy will be running these ovals next year. And I think after he's seen the success that Grosjean had, I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that Jimmy's going to find himself on these ovals next year. But welcome back, Tony. He was in for Jimmy Johnson. It was good to see Tony in the car. Nice, clean race. Not a lot of drama. Stayed out of trouble after starting 17th to a 13th place finish. Had a nice mix with Roman Grosjean right before Roman kicked it into freight train mode. Just a smart, clean race. Brought the car home. I don't know that you could really ask for much more than that. There was a lot of activity in that midfield. So certainly there's plenty of opportunity for Tony to get caught up somewhere. And thankfully he didn't. So 19th place, Scott Dixon. Yikes. This could not have come at a worse time for Dixon, and for Palou for that matter. This was the first DNF for Scott since August 2019 at this very track, where he finished 20th for mechanical failure. Dixie qualified 8th, really not bad qualifying. So it's not as if he was put in a situation where that was going to cause him trouble. After the crash and being able to repair some of that damage, the Ganassi team did a good job of trying to get Dixie back on track, but it just wasn't going to do much to help the point situation. They were in the pits, I think it was 80 laps or something, trying to get Dixie back out. So he goes from 3rd place to 5th place in the championship. I don't know if this means that the championship hunt for Dixie is over this year. I think it just means they're going to have to be super, super clean in the final 3 races of the season, which I all sort of history points to the fact that they will be. So I don't know that it's over, but certainly there's a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do for Palou as well. Alex finishes 20th here, got caught up in that same situation with Dixon on this with Renus VK, by the way, who started all this. I heard on someone's podcast earlier this week, I I listen to a lot of these IndyCar podcasts, certainly for my own education and certainly for my own tips and pointers too, as we endeavor on our own here. But I heard on someone's podcast earlier this week that even if Palou doesn't win the championship, it wouldn't be that bad because nobody expected him to win this year anyway. I might agree with that to a certain extent, but I kind of look at it a different way in that next year will be a super hot pressure cooker for him next year because of the success that he had this year. Whether he wins the championship or not, I think you go in under this anticipation that Alex is going to be a top championship contender. And if he flounders or starts out a little slow in the early part of the season, which Ganassi team is prone to do, then, that's all that pressure starts adding on because it just becomes part of the storylines. Every NBC broadcast can be talking about it. All the Twitter is going to be talking about it. And then it just starts to play into these drivers. So, is it okay that he doesn't win the championship this year because nobody expected him to? Sure. Does it change anything? A little bit, yeah, but I don't think it gives him any leeway or any kind of support whatsoever because it makes it worse for next year. He goes from first place to second place. I don't know that it's over because now really the pressure gets turned up on O'Ward, who's had a good season this year, but he's had a good season this year and has been running a very smart championship drive. So does Aaron McLaren SP have the resources and the wherewithal to kind of finish this thing off in the final 3 races of the season and take this championship from Chip Ganassi? I don't know. He doesn't also have to just look at Dixon and Palou. He's got a Josef Newgarden that is all of a sudden all over the place. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. This is where I really miss my co-host here, but because I have been rough on Newgarden. We're going to talk about this a little bit more, but I don't know where this goes. Right. This is the season long championship. And the guy right now who's, I think the one who's looking like a ninja out there is Josef Newgarden, just where it is. And certainly far from where I've been talking about the last several races. So what do I know? 7th place, Ryan Hunter-Reay, another, I mean, this is a great finish for Ryan. I think he needs it. Started 13th and was up to P7th at the start. He was on it, part like the old Canan days where at the drop of the green flag, Tony would just come around and pass a bunch of guys on the outside. We saw Ryan Hunter-Reay doing something very, very similar. The strategy didn't play out as well. It got cut out with some late yellows. And I believe he finished as high as he could at this point. He was really the only guy who was able to hold off the Grosjean freight train right around lap 100 as that was coming through. I do want to talk a little bit about Ryan Hunter-Reay and an article that Robin Miller put out on racer.com talking about Ryan was looking for a fresh start in 2022 and that it was going to be his last year at Andretti all along. At least that's how I read it. I don't know if that was the case. I'm not calling Ryan Hunter-Reay a liar or Andretti Autosport a liar, but it just seems to me that if Ryan was signing a 1-year deal and DHL was signing a 1-year deal with that, I don't know why you wouldn't say that this could potentially be Ryan's last full year or put sort of spin on it. Or at least there's ways to put things out to the media and out there where you want to get a message out. Michael Andretti proved that when he said, there's definitely going to be a change this year on those 2 cars, right? Hinchcliffe and Ryan Hunter-Reay. So there's ways to put that out there. So am I suggesting that this is a little sleight of hand or maybe something that's helping, polish the look of Ryan departing Andretti, where he's been part of that family for 10 years and he's been riding around with this DHL sponsorship for 10 years, maybe, but I don't know. I don't know that I'm buying that plan, that was the plan all along, number one. And number two, does Ryan Hunter-Reay land a full-time gig somewhere? I don't know. Certainly something intriguing that's out there, that's hanging out there, is this potentially open spot that I think is becoming the worst kept secret in IndyCar at Shank, to be a partner with Elio Castroneves in the 60 car that's likely to be vacated by Jack Harvey, who's on a move somewhere else, rumored to be Rahal. But does Hunter Ray go there? Does Hunter Ray go to Ed Carpenter Racing as a full-time driver, or maybe, a road course specialist for Ed as Ed continues his part-time gig? I don't know. I don't know that, like I said, I don't know that I'm buying that this was the plan all along. And I just don't know if Ryan Hunter-Reay lands a full-time ride next year. He's a paid driver, and he deserves to be a paid driver. I don't know that he's a paid driver. And I think that that's what could possibly be a hindrance for him in his efforts for 22. Sometimes these podcasts develop a theme, and certainly we talked a lot about luck in this particular podcast, and I just think one guy whose luck is just run out is James Hinchcliffe, finishing 15th. His race was derailed on the parade lap. We saw that Hinch had to come in for a steering wheel change, which is a big deal in modern Indy cars. The steering wheel controls everything, so he had to cycle through on a reboot. Came in for a new steering wheel. Nothing seemed to be going Hinch's way from there. He finished 17 laps down right before they shut it down for the night. He was just trying to stay out of people's way. I don't know what to say here. I know I'm very, very easy on James Hinchcliffe because I like him. I like the personality. I think he's good for IndyCar. I enjoy watching him on TV. I am thrilled that he's in the car. I think what happened to him a couple of years ago with the McLaren takeover there at Arrow, where they changed from Honda to Chevy and Hinch was out, and then he found himself on a gap year on TV, and then back into Andretti with Genesis. I was thrilled for him because I think he's a good guy. He's great personality. If I had a multi-million-dollar company like that, I would want to sponsor somebody like James Hinchcliffe. Whether or not he has this motivation to continue on, I'm sure he does. I don't know how many other teams out there right now are going to be lining up to put him in their car. Again, he has a little bit of budget, or at least has had a little bit of budget, but essentially he's a paid driver. So I don't know what James would be able to stitch together for next year. This is very, very sad for me, but where I find a little bit of solace, I guess, is I would certainly expect to see him on NBC and on these broadcasts. And to me, I think that's okay. I'd like to see him there. I'd certainly love to see him in a car, but if I can't see him racing around, I would love to see him on the NBC broadcast because I think he's great. Alexander Rossi. Was this bad luck for Alexander, or was this a case of trying to make lemonade out of lemons? He's an experienced oval driver. He's an experienced IndyCar driver. He's an experienced race car driver. He got caught out of the groove, skated on the marbles, and right into the wall. And this was after a little bit of a testy exchange with his strategist, which, in the heat of the moment, we could probably give him a little bit of a pass on that. But I also think there's some frustration because I think the results haven't been there, not just this season, but I think over the last couple of seasons. He's certainly shown a lot of speed this year. In certain cases, the luck hasn't panned out or the strategy hasn't panned out. And I think that's where he's at right here. I think this is bad luck for him. Trying to make a little bit more maybe, or just kind of ran out of patience and found himself in the wall. I do want to say this. Pato Award suggested in his post-race interview that Rossi is someone to watch, suggesting possibly that Rossi is a dirty driver. I don't know if Alexander Rossi is a dirty driver. My opinion of watching him in IndyCar and watching these races like I do, always have, even before this podcast, I wouldn't suggest that Alexander Rossi is a dirty driver. I don't think he's an inept driver. I don't think he's a rolling chicane or anything like that, because we've seen those in IndyCar history. But I just thought that was an interesting perspective by Pato O'Ward, who's very, very new to this series compared to Alexander Rossi. And again, on someone else's podcast last week, they questioned, and I found this very, very interesting, if Alex was sorry that he didn't sign with Team Penske a couple of years ago. I don't know that he is. Obviously, he knew what he was getting himself into when he signed or chose to re-sign with Michael Andretti and Andretti Autosport and Honda versus going to Team Penske. You know who Team Penske is. This is not like taking a chance on, some team that's new to the series, found themselves a nice budget, and they're coming together, or maybe they got support and, whatever. He knew what he was doing there. He's even if you're just partially listening or partially paying attention in that paddock, you know who Team Penske is at IndyCar. And you know what Andretti Autosport is. They're a great team. They've been part of the top three for a long time. So is he sorry that he didn't sign with Team Penske? I don't know. But he knew what he was getting into there. And I think there's some ebbs and flows, and I think there's some luck that kind of has to come your way. I don't know. There's something there to me, I feel like, with Andretti Autosport, and I kind of hinted at it last week when I asked the question of Tim, does Grosjean stay with Coyne, knowing what he knows or seeing what he can see happening at 50% of Andretti Autosport? So to me, I feel like there's something there. Is Alex sorry? I don't know, but I just feel like there's something there. Herdomania 2.0. Bad luck, man. The theme of this series, this podcast, bad luck. I can't remember the last time we had a drive shaft failure. We talked about it with Felix Rosenquist. I can't remember the last time we had a drive shaft failure, let alone two. So Herdomania 2.0 comes in for his stop. At the conclusion of the pit stop, he roasted that inside tire like a marshmallow. Thing just went off there. He lost that drive axle on the outside. And again, this is just a bizarre set of circumstances, and continues this string of lousy luck by, for Colton Herta. I feel in a lot of ways he's the number one guy in this team, this season in particular. But the luck is just not falling his way of late, and falls in line with an up and down season, which is really just sad. I did look at his finishes, and what I'll say is this: if he's not low single digit or winning, he's a double digit finisher. This season, as an example, 22nd at Barber, first race of the season. St. Pete, second race, first place win. 22nd place finish at Texas 1, 5th place at Texas 2, 13th place at IMS Road Course. And it just continues to move on that way. So is that a question of youthful exuberance? I don't know. But he's hanging it out. He's wringing the neck of this car at every circuit, and he seems by far the most accomplished Andretti Autosport driver this season. And he seems to be really clicking and getting the most out of that car and doing as well. But man, if he doesn't finish in the top single digits, he's out. And I think the history shows that. So again, I don't know if that's youthful exuberance or what that really is, but it's something to really look at, and maybe something that would get honed in the off season through some coaching and, from his dad and from Michael Andretti and the brain trust there at Andretti Autosport. So Meyer Shank, great finish by Jack Harvey, 10th place. Nice finish here, kept it clean after a 15th place qualifying effort, which again, with all the action going on in the midfield in this thing, finishing out 10th after starting 15th, I think is a solid effort. He was racing as high as 6th until his last pit stop right around lap 198. So a little bit of strategy just didn't play out, didn't work out for him. A solid finish, not his best. If you're watching our Turn 4 podcast Twitter handle, you would see that I called out the fact to the team that in their race report on the Meyer Shank Racing website, we called out the fact that their race report suggests that this 10th place was the best finish by Jack Harvey, which it wasn't. He had finished 6th in IMS road course last week. And of course, he had a 4th place finish earlier in the season at St. Pete. So, oops, I didn't mean to call him out on Twitter. So I do apologize to the PR folks at Meyer Shank Racing, but it was necessary. Come on. If somebody didn't see it, I don't know if Jack Harvey looks at this team's websites, for these race recaps. So again, my apologies to the PR staff, but it was necessary. So I hope you guys forgive me. Moving on, Carlin Racing. No Max Chilton this weekend. Max doesn't run the ovals, and so we had Connor Daly in there, which Connor's always been a good pedal around an oval in these Carlin Racing cars. Connor finished 11th. He started 20th. Came through all of the activity and everything that was coming through there. And I think 11th place was a pretty good finish for him. Last week we talked about this jockey versus the horse, theory. Is it the horse or is it the jockey? I don't know. I'm certainly not close enough to it. And I'm just postulating from a distance, right? This is what I'm doing. I'm speaking into a microphone and I'm giving you my opinion. My opinion here is in a lot of ways, I think it's the jockey, right? I know that, in fact, today, right before I came onto the podcast here and started recording, there was a story out on racer.com that talked about Max is looking at his options for next year, that he'd really like to see Carlin move to a 2-car team effort because they feel like and it certainly proves to it. And we've talked about it here that, Carlin Racing would do well with a second car, double the input, double the feedback, double the opportunity to, improve and being able to, and bring this team forward. But I just want to say, he was 17th in final standings with his first year at Ganassi. 11th, his second year at Ganassi, and those are multi-car efforts. And Max's best finish of the season here was 10th at Road America. Otherwise, 18th or higher is where we're at with that. Is that a function of them being a 1-car team? Perhaps. But we've seen other 1-car teams, Jack Harvey, outperform in that in some other ways. And maybe that can be attributed to the close technical relationship that Meyer Shank has with Andretti Autosport. Maybe it could be Jack Harvey. So I'm not saying that, Max Chilton doesn't deserve a shot at an IndyCar, because he certainly does. And he brings a budget and he brings some exuberance to this thing. He brings a lot of experience. He was a Formula One reserve driver. So, where we're at with that, but I think we have to temper our expectations here, even if Carlin does find themselves with a second full-time effort next year. Moving on to Coin, 14th place for Roman Grosjean does not tell the story. So if somebody were to just look at the box score for this race and say, Roman finished 14th place, what's the matter with you guys? It was the talk of the entire broadcast, and he was. I can't remember the last time somebody got this much attention in their oval debut. And I mean, really, the name that comes to mind is Nigel Mansell. And I'm not comparing necessarily Roman Grosjean to Nigel Mansell, but it probably is the amount of attention and the amount, of eyes looking at some ex-Formula One driver's debut on an oval. And the last time we saw that, I would suggest, would be Nigel Mansell. So we've had a lot of Grosjean news this year, and this oval debut is no exception. He gets a lot of attention on NBC, and I think deservedly so. He's a super nice guy. He's got a smile that'll make anybody smile back. And certainly what he went through with Formula One, and he seems to be enjoying himself. He's a beautiful family. who also seems to be enjoying themselves, visiting and traveling throughout the United States too. So good on him with it. He had a solid debut in his first oval. I think he showed some real spunk, or what I want to say, la courage, in about a 20 lap span starting on lap 80. Romain Grosjean drove around, essentially, Tony Kanaan, Indy champion and Indy season champion, Dalton Collette, Connor Daly, very experienced oval driver, Jack Harvey, experienced oval driver, and Scotty McLaughlin in a Penske, which was hooked up all weekend. So Romain was able to come through those guys in about a 20 lap span. It really wasn't until he arrived at the gearbox of Ryan Hunter-Reay that he was slowed down by any stretch, that he was slowed down there in his efforts to continue his move forward. I don't think that the ensuing pit stop was kind to Romain. I also think that maybe he was a little too confident coming out on that pit stop, where he came out hot on cold tires. And I think he got a very clear reminder. If not a reminder, he got a very clear education on what that looks like, and that he still had some learning on ovals to come against. So the strategy really just didn't work out in the end here, which is a shame. And really the second time this season I can think of this happening. The other at Mid-Ohio, where the strategy just didn't work out for him. Normally, I would suggest that Dale Coyne is really a great strategist, and I think that his Dale Coyne strategy has always served his drivers well. I know that it's Olivier, and I don't remember the last name, I'm sorry, that calls that race, but certainly Coyne would have some input there. If not, I'd be surprised at that. But I think part of that strategy at Coyne is what's been able to help some of those drivers that have come through Coyne, achieve at a very high level that gets a lot of attention to drivers at bigger teams. So I think overall, Romain had a terrific oval debut and was taking some very seasoned oval drivers apart toward the latter half of that race. So it's not a question of if he hits the wall, it's a question of when he's going to hit the wall, but he didn't do it this weekend. And I think that that's a win. This is a fantastic effort by him. I think a fantastic effort by the team. He had a lot of coaching in there, which I think is fine. I think both from the pit box and from the spotters, which I think is fine. If he doesn't mind all that chatter going on in his ear while he's riding around at 170, 180 miles an hour with a lot of traffic around him, then by all means, give it to him, right? Help him through this thing. It's a team effort. Everybody wins. And that's what I like to see with this. '24th place, Ed Jones, in the Sebastian Bourdais Sealmaster Honda. I think that Jones's day obviously just never got going, right? He tangled with Graham Rahal on lap 2. We talked about it a lot when we talked about Graham's race. It's just too early in an oval race to be racing like that. Did he run out of talent? No. That's a horrible thing that Graham said. I really wish he hadn't said that. And I think in a lot of ways, Graham wishes he hadn't said that too. Graham was on the brakes, so I don't think Ed Jones was Rahalled by any stretch. I think that was a bad thing for him to say too. Graham was on the brakes. I think he was trying to get himself out of there because he realized that Jones was coming in hot there and that it's early in the race. No reason to be racing like that. And Jones just drifted up. When you look at that replay time and time again, I think, Townsend Bell, Lee Diffie, Paul Tracy all kind of agree that this was just a racing incident. This was something that, albeit unnecessary, wasn't something that was malicious or something that was just happened out of a driver being foolish or, out of talent. So, just kind of a drag for Ed Jones. I think a drag for that team. They really needed, I think, a good showing and some good luck going into this, and it just didn't pan out for them. Ed Carpenter Racing, here's another one, right? 21st place, Renus VK. Renus took out the two top championship contenders. I'm not laughing at that situation. I'm just laughing at, oh my God, how you've got to feel like mortified if you're Rinus VeeKay to think that you have a single-handed impact on the championship in a way that he did this weekend, right? He took out Alex Palou and Scott Dixon at the same time. Just drove a little too deep into turn one, starting a chain reaction that ended the day for Palou and Dixon. Like I mentioned, Dixon tried to get his car back out to try to gain some points if he could, to no avail. And Palou's day was ended, completely done. On Twitter, Rinus was, in my opinion, appropriately remorseful and accountable for what happened. So good for him for owning up to his mistakes and really putting it out there. Like I said, I feel like he had to be mortified just putting himself into that situation with these two championship contenders. I don't think he's a knucklehead. I just don't think he's a knucklehead. He won earlier in the season. It's kind of been a bummer since. But I don't think he's a knucklehead, and I don't think he's a dirty driver. So I really give him a pass on this one. This is a real drag. He's going to beat himself up for it, so nobody else really needs to be beating him up on that. Ed Carpenter, 22nd place finish, right behind his teammate. Welcome back, Ed. Ed spun on his own on lap 56 and turn 4, right about before. It didn't really look like Ed had an ill-handling car earlier in that race. He might have drifted a bit onto the red and white curbing, which we did see a little bit of that during qualifying and kind of in parts of this race. And maybe that's what caught him out and decided to turn his car backwards. I don't know how to say this, but next year they're going to have more ovals. We know that, but given the limited amount of oval racing that's happening this season in IndyCar, and Ed comes and just races these ovals for his own team, I don't know how sustainable that is. Meaning, I don't know how prepared Ed comes in. I would suspect that being able to do this week in and week out, being on the simulator when you get a chance to in between races, and keeping your reflexes and keeping your racecraft sharp is all kind of repetitive, just like anything, right? Pitchers pitch every day, whether they're on the mound or not. Batters take batting practice. Football players are at practice, on Tuesday through whatever, right? And I think that kind of helps you stay at the sharper end of your game. And it's not as if Ed's not a sharp driver or a good driver, because he certainly is, and he's proven himself to be. But these long layoffs in between these few oval races this season, I don't know how sustainable that is for someone like Ed Carpenter. So I'm thrilled to see him out there. I'm thrilled to see United States Air Force on the side of that car, because we should always give a shout out to our military for doing what they do, and we appreciate what they do, and we appreciate Ed giving them that exposure and that opportunity at that exposure. But even if Ed, I just don't know where you go from there. So I dropped my pencil. I'm so exasperated. So that concludes. That's where that is. We've gone through the teams by team. Carpenter finishes on the tail end of that, 22nd place with that. So I want to give a little bit of a shout out. I got kind of an other category here going on. I want to give a shout out to champweb.net for the follow on Twitter. That made my evening. I was complete with that follow, so I appreciate that. Like I said, I was manning the Twitter feed over the weekend, live tweeting during the race. Was thrilled to be able to do that. I was thrilled at some of the interaction that did that, particularly with champweb.net. I do like their content and I like their perspective. I follow them on Twitter. Obviously, I enjoy seeing what they put out there. I think they do cool stuff. Also to Twitter handle Real New Yorker on Twitter, also for the follow. So we appreciate that. But just kind of moving on here, obviously this pod went by pretty quickly, so just got a couple of quick topics here. Next race in Portland on September 12th, which kicks off 3 consecutive races to finish the season. One thing that I am interested to see is Long Beach has always been one of the best attended races on this IndyCar calendar. One of the best events. It's a bucket list item for me. And, but moving this race from its traditional April date to September, where it's going to be not only in competition with the NFL season, but also in a season where the NFL now has a team. They actually have 2 teams in the LA area. So I'd be curious to see what happens to the attendance of this race, or if maybe not enough NFL crossover IndyCar NFL fans, will forego going to the Long Beach Grand Prix, given what a great event it is. And then finally, I want to say this too. I've been a seller on Josef Newgarden for several weeks now, but after this win, I can tell you I'm starting to sweat this a little bit. Right? He's turned it on right at a time where the top championship contenders, Palou and Dixon, are starting to find some bad luck and starting to falter. Pato O'Ward has been very smart and very calculated with what he's got going on there. So certainly that's not going to, I don't see that that's going to stop. But, are you, the listener, are you still a buyer, or are you a buyer on Josef Newgarden and I was just selling like someone who's completely uninformed? Let me know. Take a look at us at Turn 4 Podcast on Twitter and Turn 4 Podcast at gmail.com. So it has been a pleasure talking to you tonight. Look forward to catching up with you in a few weeks. Remember, we're going to be off a little longer here while we get to the Portland race on September 12th. And certainly Tim will be back from his assignment. So look forward to hearing back from Tim. I look forward to hearing from your feedback here. Also look for us on Facebook at Turn 4 Podcast. We got a public group page there where you can take a look and leave us some comments at Turn 4, the number 4, turn4podcast.com. So thank you. I hope everybody has a good night, and look forward to catching up with you in just a few weeks after Portland.